Good morning, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Hawk Blogger Mornings. I am Brian Nemhauser. You can find me on Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, Blue Sky, all the places at Hawk Blogger. And if you didn't know, you can actually get Hawk Blogger Mornings as an audio podcast on Spotify and YouTube Music. And if you want, you can get it on any podcast platform you want. All you got to do is join over at patreon.com/hawkblogger. You get a little private link and you can put it in any podcast platform and get it there. So it is a Saturday, which means only one thing can be true. Our pal Jeff Simmons joins us today. And Jeff, man, how's it going, dude? Good to see you.
I'm all right, man. It's weird though. It's Super Bowl week and I'm not even thinking about the game. So it's been
I hear you.
It's been an odd week.
Yeah, I definitely hear you about that. I really haven't thought much about it either. And I mean, I don't think we're going to talk much about it, to be honest. It's there, we'll watch it and someone will be the Super Bowl champ. But outside of that, I don't think I have much else to say about it. So, have you solidified your plans for what you guys are going to do?
I think I'm going over to a buddy's house. I think the mother-in-law is going to help watch the baby for a bit, but with me, everything's a game time decision right now. So
Yes.
well,
Yeah.
we'll see. I don't want to hatch too many plans in stone.
That is life. That is life as a parent. Well, I got a bunch of stuff that I wanted to go over with you today. I had a lot of fun yesterday running into some sound from various other podcasts that I wanted to play, and we can react to together, and so we'll do that. I'm sure we'll end up doing a mock draft because why wouldn't we? I got to do that. Before I get into any of those things, any reactions to, I guess this morning, the latest thing I saw, Jeremy Fowler and Dan Graziano had an article up on ESPN. They had some latest news. Sounds like the Matt Stafford trade thing is a lot about nothing. He's going to stick around. Sounds like, I don't understand the Cooper Kupp thing. Like why that there's going to be New England would be crazy to not make a trade for Cooper Kupp. And then there's stories about where's Devontae Adams going to sign? He might sign with the 49ers. Who cares? Did anything in that article jump out to you as actually that's interesting news?
No, but I had the same reaction as you. So those guys they always put together some interesting stuff. And their hit rate's kind of been up and down, but what happens in the NFL is becomes more about there's a personnel term more name than game at this point. And it felt like everyone in that article fell under that category. Like Devontae Adams, he's fine. He had a good second half of the year with the Jets, but I think we're past the point where a 30-plus-year-old slowing down receivers is a needle mover. I don't really care if he goes to the Chargers or the 49ers. Devontae Adams when he was 25, sure, but Cooper Kupp, I think me and you were texting at the end of last year, this guy can't run anymore. And his contract's got to be pretty bloated at this point. A couple of years ago, he was the best player in the league at receiver, but we talk about this all the time. This is not a linear league. I think people fall off very quickly, and when you lose one tool like he did, I think he's going to end up getting cut, and someone's going to sign him, and he's going to be an okay number. How much talk this year was about Odell Beckham? Where's Odell Beckham
still?
Going? No one even signed him.
And I know. Well, and Amari Cooper, that was a big deal for Buffalo.
The Bills got Amari Cooper.
He's absent. I mean, he was a ghost. Yeah.
The Stafford thing, I was kind of hoping that would get a little ugly. And everyone's talking about the contract. I know, Albert Breer was saying this week, he was trying to say maybe the Steelers go and get Stafford. And maybe the Rams go with Darnold and start kind of set the clock back. But then they're that's kind of, I think the Russ stuff has been bubbling this week. If you've been following the story out of New Orleans, Jay Glazer went on with the Matthew Berry and was saying that basically he doesn't think Russ ends up with the Raiders. And Glazer's super connected to Mike Tomlin. I think they're very close. And Glazer's he's not going back there. And then I looked into it. I saw another local beat guy there saying that the Russ stuff really bubbled in the second half, where Russ and Arthur Smith were not seeing eye to eye, and Russ's camp is now leaking stories about Arthur Smith. It's a very familiar playbook.
Mm-hmm.
We've all seen this happen. It's now Seattle, Denver, Pittsburgh, and then the story comes out today. They're probably moving off Russ. So the vibe in New Orleans it's not looking good for Russ and where that's gone, and it's not a third straight team to kind of walk away from him. But other than that, it's a lot of.
I don't know, like musical chairs for Russ. Like I don't know how many chairs are left for him. You know, like I don't know. Everyone's assuming like the Raiders. I think that's very unlikely. I really do. I think that's maybe like a plan F for the Raiders. Like I think they got a lot of other options, and I don't know. And if it's not the Raiders, then where?
I'm wondering if the Raiders stuff has been coming up by Russ's camp more than the Raiders, and they're trying to leak. Oh, Russ and Pete are good now, and all this stuff. And I'm sure that's a great landing spot for them, but yeah, I think Sam Darnold will be higher than them. I think if Geno, I don't think Geno's going to end up coming out after. We'll probably talk about this in a bit, but I think he'd be higher on their list. And then it's like, okay, where are the Giants really going to take like 35-year-old Russ to save their jobs? Are the Jets going to sign Russ after their Rodgers thing? I don't know. We're running out of like. Is he going to go compete with Anthony Richardson for a job? Like, is that what's next for him?
Well, and it reminds me a little bit of my old life in corporate world, where if you've got an employee and they come to you once and they're kind of complaining about their manager, so they're skip leveling up to you, and they're jumping ahead of their manager, and they're like, my manager's doing this and I can't, or they're working with somebody else and they can't get them like to do what they need to do, and they've got all these legitimate reasons why they're a problem, and you help them out and you kind of move through it. And then they come to you, you know, a year later or 6 months later, and it's another person that they can't, like, they're telling you all these reasons why they can't work with this person and why they're a problem. And then 3 months later, they're telling you about another person. At some point, you start saying, well, there's a pattern here. And honestly, like, if you can't figure out how to work with people, I actually told people this, that it's a skill to be able to work with a wide variety of people. Yeah. Like that's a valuable skill to not like if you need somebody to be the perfect offensive coordinator for you that does exactly what you want and like everything's perfect for you to succeed, then you're a little bit less valuable as a quarterback. And so, you know, combine that with the tape that he's put on there, combine that with age, combine that with just like he's not super embraced, I think, across the league. Yeah. I think Russ is in a tough spot, and I think he's only got a little bit of time left is my best guess. And I'm not thrilled about it, but I also just want to be like, that's where I see things headed. And it's a shame. I actually thought he maybe found a place in Pittsburgh. I thought it was a good fit for him, and things seemed to really,
they tailed off.
Yeah. They really fell apart there at the end. We got a couple super chats. Let's get to these before I play some sound for everybody. We're gonna have some fun with this sound. We've got some Marshawn Lynch stuff, which is always just gold. We've got some Kay Adams stuff with Devon Witherspoon and with JSN, and then we've got some Mike Macdonald sound. So Bryce Coots has given away 10 Hawk Blogger memberships already, so he's got us kicked off in the right way. Thank you, Bryce, for your generosity. Appreciate that. Garth Knight says, fellas, knife to the neck, who you got in the Super Bowl? I don't think any knives are needed. I mean, I think we're both already
let's relax.
We picked the Chiefs, right?
Yeah, I'd pick the Chiefs.
Yeah, I think it's the Chiefs. And then Bryce with a super chat says, love the show, guys. What did you make from McDonald's small clip about Aaron Levine interview in regards to Geno? Well, we're going to play that in a little bit, so you'll get to hear our reaction to that. But a good question, and we will get to that in just a bit. So first things first. So I'm going to cue this up a little bit, Jeff. I'm going to out myself first, as within our Real Hawk Talk crew, I'm the only person that has a positive perception of Tom Cable. Is that fair? Do you think that's right?
Yeah, I think that's right. Like, I think like my view of him is a little somewhere between you and everyone else, but yeah, I think that's pretty accurate.
I mean, there are. I think there's more folks in our chat that think he is like evil, like not truly evil, but like was a terrible part of that team and the reason that the Seahawks didn't succeed more. My perception, well before I listened to any of this other stuff, has always been Tom Cable reached Marshawn Lynch in 2011, well before Russell Wilson was drafted. And over the last course of that season, the Seahawks had a run game. I will never forget Marshawn Lynch just dead-legging Ray Lewis in that 2011 season, and how that run game just blossomed the last part of that year. And I don't think the Seahawks win a Super Bowl if Tom Cable was not hired as the offensive line coach. I'll go that far. I'll go as far as to say I think Tom Cable was the best assistant coach hire or coordinator hire that Pete Carroll made.
Offensively or in general?
Period.
Better than Dan Quinn.
Dan Quinn was not a hire. Like, that was a retention.
Well, they rehired him.
Sure. I put Dan Quinn and Gus Bradley in their own category. They were decided to be retained. It's like saying Clint Kubiak hired Jake Peets if they ended up
fair. But he ended up leaving and then he came back. But
he did. He went to Florida, but like he already that wasn't, to me, that's not the same.
Fair enough.
Cable was like added to
as part of the problem.
Daryl Bevel's the only other guy to me I'd put in that category maybe.
There has been a lot of good ones.
There haven't been a lot of good ones. So I also thought it was time to get rid of him. I thought he made a lot of he ran out of juice. But generally, I think he was a key part of what made that Seahawks offense as physical and successful as they were. That's my perception.
Yeah, I think what happened with him was he was kind of from the Alex Gibbs school. He was with him in Atlanta. They ran the system, and that kind of offense with cut blocking was a big deal. And the zone blocking with cut blocking, and it allowed you to kind of place lesser players in a system and succeed with them, and you could kind of coach guys up. And if you remember 2010, the Seahawks played the Raiders and got just demolished. I think it was 33-3. And I think Pete was like, holy shit, who are these guys? That's what drew him to Cable. And when that zone blocking stuff was working, even if you watch some of the 2013-14, you see where the guards are, they're just diving into dudes' legs. And when that was going, Cable was one of the better position coaches in the whole league. And if you ever heard Marshawn talk about him, Marshawn has credited him several times. And I try to listen to every Marshawn clip I can. I just love the guy. He says Tom Cable, more than anyone in his coaching, was the guy who kind of saved his career. Not Pete. It's always come back to Tom Cable. I think what happened was once the zone blocking went away and Cable got still more confident that I can develop anyone, and I think the influence he had on Schneider and how much Schneider has relied on and Pete have relied on position coaches, I think he had became a heavy hand in their drafting and their offensive line mistakes. And I know people in our chat blame him for how they ended up transitioning to the offensive line. And so I know I've spoken to people in the front office that had a real issue with how Cable was influencing John and Pete's draft evaluations. And so once it got to that point, he did really become a problem. And when they were trotting out Bradley Sowell and all these guys, and he said, I don't want Jari Evans. And Jari Evans goes off and it's a Pro Bowl season. It tailed off completely. I think you're dead on, and that's my perspective of him. I think when the zone blocking, the cut blocking stuff was working, he was a dead valuable assistant. Once that went away and he kind of doubled down on himself, he really spiraled out of control. And the end of the Cable era was awful. So I'm sort of in the middle, a classic Jeff take, but I think we saw a natural decline, and I don't think it was a coincidence.
I think that's all right. I agree with pretty much everything you said there. And the piece, the reason I'm bringing all this up is I'm not going to play a bunch of sound. I'm going to play a few clips from, he was on the Get Got pod. If you're looking for it on Google, make sure you put the DA at the beginning to find it. But with Marshawn Lynch and Mike Robb. And there's a bunch of clips out there from highlight moments, and I'm not going to play those. You can find those elsewhere. I'm not going to, there's to talk about the play in the Super Bowl. I'm not going to play that. But there's three clips I wanted to play. And one of them's not about Tom Cable's not even on at this point. This is the beginning of the pod. They're actually talking about Pete Carroll. And it was hilarious, man. Listening to Marshawn and Mike Robb talk about Pete, the first half an hour was just, I mean, it was gold. Like listening to Marshawn's perspective on Pete and how different they are, and like where he where he respected him and where he just like did not understand him. So I want to play a clip here of him talking about Pete Carroll and the fact that Marshawn would keep some weird hours, and Pete's energy at these hours and what it felt like for him. So this is him talking about Pete Carroll.
And doing the same shit, bro, because, you know, I got weird ass hours of operation. Like, I'll come in the building at 4:30 in the morning or something, go get in the sauna or some crazy shit like that. And Cuz would be coming in at like 5 and shit. And remember, nigga, he just left probably at like maybe 12:30, yeah, 1 maybe. And the nigga, when he leaving out, he walking with that same bounce that you see him on the field. Hey, all right, now have a good night. Like, nigga, the fuck wrong with you? Like, nigga, we just had a whole day full of work, nigga, after hours. And then, nigga, you go home for about 10, 20 minutes and come back and you got the same energy. Hey, wait, like, nigga, you see I'm in here asleep, bro, trying to get some rest. And you come in here waking me up and hella shit. And nigga, so I asked dog, I'm like, hey, bro, what you on? I know you take something, bro. Tell me what you, oh man, it's life. And just saying, yeah, let's go. We get to compete. And I'm like, oh yeah, this nigga tweaking, bro. He
shit. Oh my god, dude, it was gold. It was gold. Did you listen to this episode, by the way?
I did. The way Marshawn describes Pete there, not sure many people have called him that word before, but Marshawn was on the Smartless podcast a couple of years ago with Jason Bateman and Will Arnett.
Yeah.
And he told a lot of that same story of just like how he would like come back like drunk and like high sometimes at like 4 a.m. and he's just trying to like chill and like get his ready for the day. And Pete's just like around there bumping around the rooms, and he's like, I can't talk to this guy at 4 a.m. and he's like smiling at me. And so I've heard a lot of like his shtick on Pete before, but it's just so funny when he talks about it. I can't imagine how annoyed Marshawn must have been trying to connect with that dude. Pete's jumping around at 5 a.m. Oh my god, it's so funny. That must have been such a funny relationship between those two.
Like they could not be more different, you know.
Yeah, exactly.
And they're both Bay Area guys, you know. Pete's a Marin County Bay Area, very different than Oakland where Marshawn's from, you know. And like they just represent those two areas really well. But definitely like recommend. So you got to listen. Like if you go to YouTube, you're just gonna get the little clips. You got to get the full podcast. And I'm telling everybody, I cannot make a stronger recommendation. If you're a Seahawks fan, you need to listen to the full 90 minutes of this entire episode. It is like from start to finish, really, really good content. And so this next part, the next two clips I'm going to play, this next one, like it's hard to really, Jeff, capture that hour with Tom Cable, because the thing that stood out to me and you're going to hear a little bit in these clips, Marshawn Lynch, he doesn't give respect easily, right?
No.
Like he doesn't. And especially to coaches, especially to authority.
To authority figures, yeah.
And the reverence that he showed Tom Cable in this episode, he was like, you could almost feel the awe, the respect. He just sat there quietly for a lot of this, just listening to Tom Cable. And there was even a couple times, if you listen carefully, where Cable kind of pontificates a lot in this episode, right?
Yeah.
And Marshawn would just say something like under his breath, like, man, I missed this. You know? I was just really taken aback by that, because Marshawn doesn't show that side of him about anybody, especially authority figures.
Yeah.
Right? So this next clip is them talking about James Carpenter. And it's basically this notion of like, how do you motivate a guy that's not motivated? And you know, Marshawn was pretty open about his perspective on Carp relative to these other guys, but I got this queued up pretty close to the right time. It's a little hard to get specifics, but here's them talking about James Carpenter.
That's why I feel comfortable saying it. I watch you
gotta
take
say that.
unmotivated. I do gotta say that
Yeah.
because they probably will Carp in a different place now, so he
Yeah.
might not. But I watch you take unmotivated, sloppy, nasty, dirty, filthy, just the shit.
Yeah.
And I watch you turn that man into a man.
Yeah.
And I say that not because of what he did on the field, but when he was done,
Yeah.
what he went and pursued in his life after he was done. And I believe that that was a testament to what you instilled in him when he was unmotivated.
Yeah.
I don't think nobody could have gotten that guy to be motivated.
You know what was interesting?
They go on and talk a little bit more about it, but you could hear it in his voice. Part of the reason I played that clip. You know what I'm talking about? How he was referring to Cable, like the just respect he has for him.
Yeah, and again, Marshawn, it's like when you hear him talk about Pete, he kind of always he makes fun of him a little bit and he takes shots, and like he obviously loves Pete. Like he was at that Raiders press conference a couple days last week, but like when he talks about Cable, and I've heard it before, it's why I've always kind of alluded to like that's Cable's kind of best work, and I was struck by the same thing. It was just he looks at him almost like a father figure, and like you don't see Marshawn respecting a lot of like white male coaches. Like he's talked about how he doesn't trust authority figures, and I know like the Buffalo media turned on Marshawn when he got into trouble, and that was where he lost a lot of respect with that whole process. But yeah, you just hear everyone always kind of puts Pete Carroll as the motivational expert, the motivational guru, and I've never heard anyone really talk about that side of Cable before, and not really Marshawn either. Like that was shocking. And if you want to remember like James Carpenter, I don't know how well you remember the 2011 draft, but when the Seahawks took him, they showed Nick Saban at the time.
Mm-hmm.
And Nick Saban's face dropped. And when college players go, these guys are like celebrating. And when he went like that, he was like, they took this dude.
And they took him to play tackle.
They took him to play tackle. And if that's a guy who's like your hardest working player, like you're not going to make that face. That always struck me. So like, it's interesting to hear that, like, that was kind of the rep of him. If he was kind of like an unassuming, quiet guy, like, I never heard him be like, and the fact that they kind of turned him around, like, that was a cool story. Like, I've never heard anyone talk about that before. Like, you've always heard about Sweezy and Max, and Carpenter always just seemed like he was a fine, once he moved him to guard at a tackle, he turned into a fine player who they missed, but you never heard that story. And that really was interesting. Like, I don't know what they were referring to, what he's become after his career. I know he played with Jets a little bit, but I haven't really seen his name surface. But I found that really interesting too.
Well, I mean, there's some great stories about J.R. Squeezy, as Marshawn talked about him, and being just like the absolute like blueprint for a Tom Cable offensive lineman. Breno Giacomini, who Marshawn called Bruno the whole time. There's a lot of Russell Okung stuff about him being soft, and that was a pretty funny clip. And then Max Unger, man. Like, I was wondering if they were going to touch on that, and they didn't. But hearing the way the stories they talked about with Max Unger, I kind of, I mean, maybe they just agreed that they weren't going to mention it, but that trade for Jimmy Graham, hearing how they talked about Max and the role he played on that line, the role he played on that offense, they've never come close to replacing that man. And I have to think everyone on that podcast thinks about that trade for Jimmy Graham as an absolute disaster.
Yeah, you've talked about it, how that was the kind of turning point of the whole program, where they went from being tough and physical to finesse, and they never really recovered from that since then. And you can always look at that Super Bowl play, but yeah, just hearing how Cable talked about like how he would kind of try to piss off Max after practice and be like, "Are you gonna try to win the day today, or are you gonna let these guys roll you over?" And just hearing how like the revere they spoke with the reverence they spoke with that guy, and like the leader he was, and like we had a couple of years of Dwayne Brown, and he had kind of that kind of presence. He just commanded respect. But really, other than Dwayne Brown, like we had him for 2-3 good years.
Mm-hmm.
They haven't come, and especially like the center, like you see so many of these offensive line, the centers, like the Jeff Saturday and the Jason Kelsey, and like that presence. And if you look at Justin Britt, was like the best center we've had since like he was not that dude. And like you just saw like Max Unger was the leader of that team, and they really, yeah, like we don't need to dive back into that trade, but I imagine that's just a sore spot for the whole, especially those guys, the offensive guys, and how they lost the leader of that group. And maybe they I don't know. I think they underestimated that. I think they overestimated his injuries. And as the O-line coach, like I remember Clint Hurt was on with Mike Duger and Chris Kidd a couple of years ago, way before he was at DC. And he was talking about how frustrating it was when they kept getting rid of his best guy. He's like, first we have Frank Clark, like the dude I developed, who they get rid of him. And then we get Jaron Reed, they get rid of him. And now we're bringing in these guys off the street. And it's like a Clowney for a year, and he's gone. And it's like, I can't imagine Cable being like, they get rid of his like leader and best dude to get like Jimmy Graham, who's the complete opposite of that personality-wise. And it's almost like curse. It's almost been like the Max Unger. It's like the Babe Ruth curse in Boston. It's like the Seahawks have like the Max Unger curse.
They do
with their offensive line.
They do.
Never recovered.
Yeah, they absolutely have not. And so this last clip, I just love this. This is also kind of speaking to Marshawn's, like, part of the reason I think Marshawn respects people is like if he thinks that if they're hard, if they're badass. And this is a conversation about Marshawn talking about how in his time in the league, that you'll hear coaches from other position groups talk about outside their area of responsibility, like say, hey, we need to get better at this or that. But there was one position group they didn't talk about. And here's Marshawn telling that story.
Time, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And get the money that way.
Yeah,
you know
well,
what I mean?
that's your preparation.
That's my preparation.
Execute the plan.
Man, you call it
There
what
you
you go
go.
to, motherfucker. Ain't nobody trying to hear that shit. In all my years of playing ball, coaches, they'll do certain things like, step out of their room to speak on another position. We got to get better at blah, 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 blah. And this will come from a coach who's not even coaching that position. I've never heard a coach. I never heard them coach speak nothing. I don't care how sorry we was. I never heard a coach mention nothing about the offensive line.
No, they won't say that. That was
nothing.
Cave's territory.
Nothing.
Cave's territory.
Nothing. And when you get in there and they actually meet you and see the type of individual that you are, I think they got even more intimidated. And it wasn't about the fact that they knew that you might crack their shit. It was because you was going to hold every individual accountable to exactly what it was that we were trying to accomplish at that time.
Yeah. That's always.
I don't know if I want to touch that one.
What's your reaction to that when you hear that?
Cable's got a history of some certain things that Marshawn alluded to, but yeah, it kind of alludes to what you were talking about at the beginning, where like the presence he brought was different. Like I don't think anyone's walking around the building scared of Andy Dickerson with that giant afro, or Scott Huff, or Mike Solari. He's like the old vet. But man, yeah, Cable had a presence about him. And I talked about it before. He kind of lost track of the whole thing once he kind of lost his golden touch and he started trying to do too much and things like that. But it just comes back to like what Pete was drawn to him about. There was that game in Oakland, I think in that rookie year, where they just punched them in the mouth. It's kind of like what drew Schneider to Mike Macdonald. And the Seahawks haven't had a presence like that building their team. That was the one thing I was hoping Mike Macdonald coming from Baltimore, he'd bring in dudes like that kind of had that, like Wink Martindale, if you remember him, like he had that kind of presence. And Cable did have that kind of presence. And obviously the offensive lines fell apart once the personnel decisions went awry, but it's kind of striking to hear the other coaches in the building are scared or they might get chopped in the face. But from the weird part, the Seahawks do, in some level, miss a presence like that. And They really have not been the same since.
And it's the part for me, Jeff. Yeah, I know Cable's history on and off the field as much as anybody else. I'm not celebrating that part of it. Cable, it wasn't just some guy that was gonna punch somebody in the face if they crossed him. That was like that. If you listen to that whole episode and that's where you come out, I think you miss the real nuggets in there. Cable was someone who held a high bar and treated people like men and expected a certain level of performance and would not hold back his criticism and would coach hard. And his guys seemed to love him for it. And guys outside that offensive line loved him for it. And there was a respect that he was given because of that. And if you listen to that episode and they talk about just how high of a bar he held for the practices, and that there were defensive linemen that would come to Marshawn and say, "Hey, 2-4, we're just trying to get to Sunday, man. This is the LOB level Seahawks." And they're like, "Can you dial back your offensive line group a little bit? Like, they're taking it too hard." And Brennan Giacomini's not going to be a Hall of Famer. J.R. Sweezy, James Carpenter, these guys aren't going to be guys that most people ever remember. These weren't the most talented players.
No.
But Tom Cable was able to fashion them into an incredibly tough, gritty group that would play the game in a way that opponents didn't want to have to play. And I look at that and I compare it to this group that you got now. And I'm like, is Charles Cross doing that? Like, I love Charles Cross. I think he's incredibly talented. Is he going to get there on his own?
No.
I don't think so.
And you look at that group, Russell Okung, the left tackle can be the finesse guy.
Yeah.
But it's got to be the other four that.
And even Olu or, I think Abe can get are these guys going to get there on their own?
No.
To hold the bar that high, to play with that kind of physicality, that to me is like what I took away was you can feel however you want about Cable as a person. Maybe he's, whatever. But I don't think you can deny the influence he had on that offensive line, on Marshawn Lynch. And if you believe Marshawn Lynch was the heart of that team, which I think most people do, Tom Cable was maybe the biggest influence, as you said, Jeff, on him and his success. And so I don't know, I just think people tend to write history the way they want to write it. I think the truth of the matter there is that guy was a massive part of why we have a Super Bowl, Lombardi Trophy in Seattle.
Yeah, and that's been something I've been hammering for years. I always talk about the example of there was a guy, Ryan Jensen, who went to Tampa Bay when they had a similar reputation. And he completely changed the dynamic of that offensive line. They're now one of the toughest, grittiest. Every year in the draft, I'm saying we got to get one of these. I know Jim Mora once referred to them as dirtbags. They don't need like a Richie Incognito or something, but they need kind of who's like the leader, who's like the gritty grinders. Like we've identified players over the years that would have really fit that. Like Tyler Booker is a really cool one, someone who could be that, but.
Mm-hmm.
It's not just the player. That's why I think the John Benton hire is a really nice addition because I know even Evan listening to your show was the stuff he was saying. It's like they've been just trying to get functional players, and you look at all the guys they have. Some of them are good pass blockers, some of them, but they've kind of lost what makes a really good offensive line and what makes a tough offensive line. And it starts with the coaching, and it comes on down. And they've really lost that in the building. And I'm hoping this is what they can get back to, but. If you want to really remember positive about that group, and even if you watch the final play of the Super Bowl, watch how well that play is protected from the offensive line. When was the last time you saw a Seahawks play look like that? So it was I think Cable right around 2011 to 14 was a different person than 2015 to 2017. Mm-hmm. I think there's two almost eras The first one, you're dead on. And it's almost like it's almost like that Max Unger trade just turned him into like a new person. And he kind of lost it. Cable Thanos. The 2015 to 17 Cable was a nightmare. 2011 to 14 was really tied to Marshawn, really tied to Unger. The whole thing, it's just, if you remember, Max Unger was not a big part of 2010. He got hurt. He was playing guard.
Yep.
Cable's the one who moved into center.
Yep.
And played center at Oregon, but they drafted him as a center. But yeah, it's almost like there's two different regimes. And I agree with you on the first one. And the second one, he's like a different man. And I don't know what broke it, the Unger trade, the Super Bowl, the cut blocking, but I think it's very real what you're saying.
Yeah. Well, we have some lighter hearted stuff to get to next with the Kay Adams stuff. Before we do, Jeff, just a reminder, folks, make sure you like and click subscribe. And then we've got a couple super chats here. Taker610 says Jacksonville and Liam Combs snapped up Grant Udinsky. They did. And, we'll see what happens there. It's a very different situation with Grant Udinsky. He's now with a play calling head coach. So I think it's not a comparable situation to what he would have been here, but I'm looking forward to seeing what happens with Mr. Udinsky, and Shane Waldron also went over to Jacksonville. So we'll see if all of these offensive coaches together cannot figure out Trevor Lawrence, then I think Trevor Lawrence is the problem, not the coaching. And Tony Bag of Donuts back with 10 Hawk Blogger memberships he's gifted. So thank you so much, Tony, for doing that. And hopefully everybody enjoys getting their free membership if you haven't already. So this next thing I wanted to play for you, Jeff, not nearly as entertaining in general, and this is a little bit laughing at as opposed to really reacting to. But I'm going to play a few different clips in a row here as best I can. And this is Kay Adams on Up and Adams show, live from the Super Bowl, interviewing Devon Witherspoon and JSN. And this is the first clip.
Was your rookie season fast as a flash, or did it go slower than you guys thought?
Okay, that's clip one. Then there is clip two.
I'm so happy that you guys are here. Looking back at your rookie seasons.
And then we'll get all the way to clip three here. You'll see. I think you understand where I'm going with this.
Proud of from this year as far as how you showed out, outside of that Giants interception that gave me all those teeth.
Yeah, that was 2 years ago.
Yeah.
Oh, dude. I mean, I'll say this. I mean, I've said wrong names. I've mixed stuff up. When you do this stuff enough and she's got tons of people coming in, it's easy to make a mistake. But nobody, she thought they were rookies.
And I watched the whole thing because I saw the clips were going around. I'm like, I'm going to find the whole interview. And she kept saying it. I'm like, it's not the rookie season. Then she brought it up again. And it's like, and the funny part is at the beginning of the interview, she's like, I met you guys in Kansas City, and the draft was in Detroit last year. So it's 2 years ago. And I remember back then she actually had the two of them on before the draft, and she's like, oh, I love you guys. And it's they ended up teammates, and she was all excited. It was like, that clearly wasn't last year. It's pretty bad to have it was painful to listen to the whole time. She kept saying it. So when Witherspoon said that, I listened to it live. I was cracking up.
Yeah. When she first said it, I was like, okay, maybe she is just asking about the rookie season. And then she came back to it. I was like, oh no. Oh no. She has no idea that they just finished their second season. And I will give Devon Witherspoon and JSN credit. Maybe they didn't realize that she didn't understand, but they could have made her look silly, and they didn't. And the way Spoon kind of responded, I thought was pretty respectful as a way to handle it.
The two of them, two of them are pretty fun. They did their media tour yesterday, promoting. I think they're doing Bounty for Wings or something.
Yeah.
And I caught a bit they went on with Florio and Chris Sims, and they actually had a pretty cool interview, just like talking about like Witherspoon was talking about like how Garrett Wilson was like the hardest player to cover last year, and he was like Marvin Harrison's not that hard to cover. He just kind of runs basic routes, and then JSN went on with the guys. Remember the famous Shane Waldron thing? Is this live? So he went on with that same show again. They found him, and he joked about it. I was impressed with the self-awareness. So,
yeah, I have to check out some of those. I missed some of that, but I mean, it's interesting because what people don't like, Devon Witherspoon should be one of the faces of this new team, this new generation. He's really reluctant to be out in front. He loves being on the field. He loves being with his teammates. He's a joker in the locker room. Like, he's come up and interrupted interviews I've been doing. Like, he's like fun. He's a fun-spirited guy. Like, all the things people love about him. But you get him in front of a camera and he's like, like, so I mean, I was happy for him that he kind of got a little bit of experience, but he even talked about during this interview that he doesn't like to be recognized. He likes to just be able to be out and do his own thing. And, the downs, like, I totally relate. Like, not that I have any of that, but I would probably be in a similar mindset if I was in his situation, but it's a little bit of a shame because this team needs personality, man.
they do, and he's got so much.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's the only thing. This was a clip that from the same interview that I thought was kind of cool. Kay Adams, one of her few questions that I thought was actually a good question was if you were to get Mike Macdonald a gift, what would be a good gift? And JSN initially talks about golf, like a golf club, because Mike Macdonald went to the Masters, and Devon Witherspoon, you could see him, he's like, nah. And people don't realize, but Spoon and Macdonald are thick as thieves. Like, they really like each other. And this was a kind of the follow-up after the golf club conversation.
Likes the golf or something like that, but
No.
or maybe
Like, nah.
maybe a report sheet of the LA Rams or
There
something
you go.
like that. Yeah,
There you
he would
go.
love that.
There you go.
That's not. Is that what you were thinking?
He would love
Give
that.
him a scouting
Give him some
report.
pointers.
So it sounds like he's an easy-going guy. He's accepting, and you can be yourself around him. How important is that, Deb?
That's easy. It makes the culture around us easy. It's a player-based coach, and it just make it easier for play for him. You know what I'm saying? Because we all rock him because he always for the players, so it's easy.
What do you think about that, Jeff?
You can see how much Witherspoon likes him. I think while watching him do the media tour, this came up a couple times, and Witherspoon, you can see like really like reveres him, and like he sees him as like his dude. JSN did have a great answer. It seemed like he struggled, but you can just see like what a football like dude he is, and like the one thing Macdonald talks about, like the one thing he wants are people wired like him. And I think Ernest Jones was like a guy they identified like him. I think the fact that you saw those John Boyle quotes at the Senior Bowl of "I want to be in control of who the guys are in the building." I think JSN is a guy like he really like. They were talking about how he referred to him as a veteran already, and there's some guys you can just see like would be Macdonald guys, Witherspoon, and this comes up with every Witherspoon interview. And like when he talks about Macdonald, he's just glowing, but you can just see like DK, is he a Macdonald guy? I don't know. Some of the guys they've drafted in the last couple of years, don't know. Charles Cross, I don't know, but man, the Spoon and him are just like you said, and you can see it's a mutual thing.
Yeah, well, and like the thing, watching Spoon kind of react viscerally when JSN said golf clubs, he's like, no, man, like Spoon knows Mike Macdonald, like he knows him on a different level, and when JSN said no, like a scouting report play sheet for the Rams, he literally like reached over and dapped up JSN, like yeah, like he has a reverence for his coach, and I think that's a great thing, man. I think that's a great sign, and I think the other thing that stands out is there was these like fan based, I think, but these rumors that came up middle of last year that Macdonald didn't have the locker room, that the locker room wasn't bought in, and you hear it from that, like it's just, I don't think that could be further from the truth.
Yeah, and is especially like hearing JSN and like you saw how he talked about Waldron the last time he didn't hold back, and he's on his third OC in his third year, but like you can just he lit up too talking about Mike, and I think with the guys they really want to build this program around, and I think that's why Mike really imagine wants the bigger part of the process. I think like the Leonard Williams who got a career year in his first year with him, and I think like the core players of this team would speak about him very different. And I think a lot of the stories that come out, I think my guess now is they got bad information. I'm guessing the bad vibes in the building were coaching related. And there was a lot of rumors that came out now that Macdonald considered firing Grubb at the bye week. And I'm guessing it was a very tense environment at that level that I don't think reflected back to the players. I think the wires got crossed there, and I'm guessing that's where that story came from.
Yeah, I think that's a really good guess about, educated guess about what happened. And there's one more clip from this, and then we'll listen to Mr. Macdonald himself. But Kay Adams kind of went hard about this notion about, okay, what happens if DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett aren't with this team next year? What do you think about that? And I think there's two parts of this that were interesting. One was the reaction from the guys. And two was the fact that Kay Adams was like, but you're hearing this. Like, we're all hearing it. So, like, the DK Metcalf, I've heard this now from a couple of places. Daniel Jeremiah was on with Brock and Salk this week. They asked him, are they hearing anything about the Seahawks, the Senior Bowl? Obviously rumors start spreading there when the personnel people. He's like, the only person I heard about the Seahawks related was DK, and that there was a number of personnel people who are like, I'd rather try to make a play for DK Metcalf than the receivers in this class. And that's what I've been saying, man. Like, I'm not saying that they're going to do it, but his value is never going to be higher than it is this offseason. Yeah. Last year of his contract, bad free agent class, bad draft class, a lot of people with young quarterbacks that need receivers. I think, and Dan Jeremiah agrees with me, by the way. Doesn't mean I'm right, but he's like, I think you get a first rounder for him for sure. And that's what I've been saying.
I think you're dead on. And the more I've dug into this, like we were saying last year during the year, like everyone's like, well, you're going to get a 1 and a 3 for him, like AJ Brown or something like that. And we're like, there's no way. Like he's not playing like it. Now you dig into this class and the market in general. It seems like T. Higgins is going to hit free agency. I think they can't franchise him again. And there is a lot of teams with cap room that are going to be thirsty for a receiver. The Patriots, the Chargers, the Washington, all kinds of teams. If you don't get T. Higgins, and T. Higgins is in an amazing situation if you're his agent, bad draft year, bad free agent year, you're the one dude, he might be the highest paid receiver in the league just based on timing.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's going to be a lot of dudes who are going to miss on that guy. And then where do you go next? You look at the free agent market, it's like Keenan Allen, Tyler Lockett, maybe like guys like that, good names, but at the back end of the back nine of their career, maybe closer to the end. There's going to be a lot of thirsty teams. And you look at the draft the last couple of years, it's like, okay, we'll just draft the guy. We'll get anyone. Brian Thomas, 23rd overall. This year, we're like Matthew Golden is like the guy we're like, oh, he could be a cool second round pick. And like, I'm seeing mocks now, and he's like 10th overall, 12th overall. It's like, really? Like, he would have been like the 5th or 6th receiver last year. Mm-hmm. And Ted McMillan's vibes are kind of weird. And it's like, okay, so if you're one of those teams that misses on Higgins, you're trying to pay $30 million. I think that's where DK is propped up like crazy. And I think you're dead on. I think this would be the year of his value. But then again, if you're the Seahawks, how do you replace him? Like I talk about that Frank Clark example where they got great return for him. They spent years trying to fix that problem.
Yep.
So it's a really tricky thing for John because is he worth the $30 million or so he would command if he was a free agent? No. Can you replace him? I don't know. Should you trade him? Maybe. It's a really interesting thing that's probably not going to go away for a while.
Well, and DK Metcalf has the opposite of Geno Smith, like where we've talked about Geno is worth more than what his market is.
Yes.
Because of a lot of these kind of reputational things or narrative things. DK Metcalf will he'll be over what his true market should be because of his reputation and because of the athlete he is. People just would pay significant for him. So this is JSN and Devon Witherspoon reacting to that question from Kay Adams.
For no longer Seahawks.
Man, that would hurt. That would hurt. I mean, those are two leaders. Have a staple in Seattle, and that would hurt.
It wouldn't feel right.
Yeah.
It just wouldn't. It'd be like something ain't right.
Right.
Something just feels off.
Mm-hmm.
But it feels like that's a possibility. Like there's all this uncertainty. I know you guys are hearing it. Like.
Don't listen to everything.
Don't listen to everything.
Right.
That's good to hear. I can't picture. I mean, Tyler Lockett's been there so long, such a great leader. Even just thinking like DK Metcalf in another uniform, it kind of doesn't. The math doesn't math for me.
Yeah, it wouldn't even look right.
It wouldn't look right.
So I mean, not the players know anything, but I mean, I thought the reaction to the question was kind of like, I wouldn't assume that this is happening. Like, and I honestly think they might be right. That's kind of my general perspective.
Yeah, like I always give the angle. The players are not the best typically to ask these kinds of questions too. They don't really see the big picture a lot of times. They don't really know what's going on a lot of the times. But I think it could be a situation where it's just like a complete non-story in the building, and it's something maybe they want to bubble around so they get better offers. Maybe they just want to have it lingering so they can kind of see if they can maximize it. But I think it's very possible it's a total non-story in the building. They could be like, okay, we're going to, like if you're trying to get Clint Kubiak, it seems like they have to recruit him. They're going to be like, we're going to get rid of one of your only weapons, cut the other one, and have you build this whole thing from scratch? I don't know. So it might be a total non-story. Like for the fan perspective, until they sign him, it's going to be a story. But I can see why the players are like, this is just nonsense. But I get it. Like one of the other guys they asked, like who you would go out for dinner with on the team, like who's the best guy? I can't remember who it was. One of them said Lockett, and I was like, that's not the answer I was expecting. So they really like Tyler. They're like, Tyler's a funny guy. He takes the bill usually. They're like, he's fun to go for dinner. He always picks up the tab. But so these guys, I've been saying it's a really hard move to get rid of Lockett and Metcalf at the same time. And look, there's a few bigger JSN fans than me, but I think if you come out and you have to build an entire receiving core from scratch with all their other needs, I think that's a very tough thing to do to a roster that has some issues with the offensive line, cornerback depth, some of the things they need to do. I think to create another problem, that's a tough sell for me at this point. I know they're going to probably have less of an emphasis on the third receiver, things like that, but I think it's a really draining thing to take them both out of there in the same year.
Yeah, I agree. And it's one of the things we're going to learn this offseason is Mike Macdonald's influence over people on the roster. And there's not a lot of people that he's been effusive about publicly. Devon Witherspoon, 100% is one of them. DK Metcalf's been another.
Yeah.
And this next clip I'm going to play for you is related to a guy that some people have interpreted Mike Macdonald's statements about Geno Smith at the end of the year a lot differently than I did. I actually got into a debate with a couple of folks, media-wise, offline about when Mike Macdonald was asked by Brock Heward and Mike Salk in his final Mike Macdonald show about Geno Smith. He's like, he like, yeah, he's gonna be back. Why wouldn't he be? Or something like that. And there are people that interpreted that as him leaving the door open that he wasn't going to be here. I interpreted it as, because I've seen the guy up close and personal, his energy there was, why are you asking this question? That's a stupid question. Like, of course he's going to be back. Well, here's Aaron Levine asking Mike Macdonald in an interview that's going to air tomorrow night. Full interview is going to air tomorrow night, Sunday night on Fox Sports Live, I think, Seattle Sports Live, 10:30 p.m. Pacific time in Seattle. And here's the question that Aaron Levine asked about, do you think Geno Smith's going to be back next year?
Do you expect him to be your starting quarterback next year?
Yeah, heck yeah, man. Geno's our quarterback. I don't understand the conversation. It's pretty obvious this guy's a heck of a quarterback. He's our quarterback. We love him. Can't wait to go to work with him. We've had a lot of non-football conversations to keep it legal over the last month or so, and I know he's really excited about Clint taking over. And yeah, I mean, this guy he's a great player, man, and we can win a championship with Geno Smith. We really believe that, and can't wait to get back to work with him.
Seemed pretty clear to me, dude.
Yeah. I thought the Clint Kubiak hire, and I was saying this to you a couple weeks ago, I thought I think it was kind of a signal for they're probably going to stay with Geno. I thought when we were going through like the Udinsky angle, or maybe I thought like the value of Kubiak is he can lift the ceiling of a player like Geno in terms of the offense they put him in terms of what they ask him to do, and building an infrastructure for him with play action under center. I thought that was a signal right away. Hearing Macdonald there, it's like, yeah, that leads to your opinion of that quote, because look, I haven't been able to get the way John Schneider's talked about Geno Smith out of my head. And I've been pushing on other podcasts that this could be the time to move off. But every time I look at the free agent market and the draft, it's like, oh my God. So I don't know if the two of them have sat together, and maybe after watching the Senior Bowl in person, he's like, okay, Geno Smith is my quarterback.
Yeah.
I saw Jalen Milroe and Jackson Dart up close, who can't take a snap under center. And all of a sudden, Sam Darnold's free agent market's starting to build up again. It's like, okay, who does that leave you with? Getting Derek Carr or Kirk Cousins? Like, I know people are like, Kirk Cousins is going to be a veteran minimum. They can get him. And they can spend that money elsewhere. And, like, I get it. He's been with Kubiak, but, like, he might be shot. And so I've always kind of got the impression Macdonald's pretty high on Geno, and he probably would love to see him with a better infrastructure. I thought it was very telling the way Albert Breer talked about the situation during the year, where he's like, they said they aren't helping him enough with play action and too much shotgun and a lot of the stuff. So I'm guessing one of the reasons they brought in Kubiak, who's an under center play action guy, who Breer alluded to those being the two problems with the team, I think before the Bears game, it always kind of lined up as like, okay, this guy's going to be back. The whole thing. I don't know where this contract thing's going to go, and things could fall apart there, but I'm guessing just from a coaching perspective, to him, it's like a no-brainer. To Schneider, who's got to pay this guy and make the money work, and if they're asking for Trevor Lawrence money, this thing could go a different direction. But Brady Henderson's been very clear of what he thinks the team's value of him is. I don't know if Geno's going to see it that way. I know Richard Sherman's been popping, like, just pay the dude whatever he wants. But I think from a coach, it's been pretty consistent with how Macdonald's talked about him and what you've said about it all year.
Yeah, we'll find out. And that's why, to me, the framing of this is how much influence will Mike Macdonald have over personnel, personnel decisions? Because DK Metcalf and Geno Smith seem to pretty clearly be guys that Mike Macdonald wants back on his team. Is that enough for them to be back on the team? Because to your point, John Schneider's not been as clear-cut about Geno Smith, at least publicly. And there's reasons why. There's all the reasons why we know that they might decide to move on. So that's one of the storylines for me this offseason. When I posted this quote and the link to this interview yesterday on Twitter, here's some of the responses. Well, I guess Mike is delusional. A word of advice to Mike: tying your future employment to Geno is a bad idea. If the Seahawks miss the playoffs again and there's no future QB that's developed, I'm not sure that you keep your job. I love the positivity from our coach, but I just disagree. Someone saying, no, Seattle's kidding themselves. Geno's at best an average QB. You're going nowhere with him. Yeah. So, here's one. If he really thinks Geno is the guy, then he must think he's a Super Bowl QB. So that will be the standard. No Super Bowl failure. Bring in a rookie we can live with not winning at all. If Mike is riding with Geno, he might put himself out of a job. Like, this is not a guy that fans are aligned behind. He's just not. And so I do think that that's another factor here. It's just, what are you going to do? What are you going to do managing ownership? And like, what is the season ticket renewal rate going to look like? I the quarterback plays a role in those things, you know? So
it is. You talk about it at games. There's 2 Seahawks fans I know in Toronto. One of them who just moved to Seattle. He was from Toronto. One of them is a radio host in Toronto. And if they talk Seahawks with me, every conversation is how bad Geno is and how much he sucks and how they got to. There was my friend who was a radio host guy after the Rams game where Geno throws 4 touchdowns. And he's like, his first message to me was, we got to cut Geno. He just got outplayed by Jimmy Garoppolo. And I'm like, that's a weird way to look at that. The backups on the Rams scored almost 30 points on them, but like they can't get this perspective out of their head. And like, look, I've been hard on Geno and a lot of times, and I've been frustrated with him. I think I know what he is and what he isn't, but the question I keep coming back to is what's the alternative? And no one really has a good answer for that. But I think a lot of your mentions yesterday were like, I'll take anyone. I don't want to pay a mediocre quarterback and get towards mediocre. How do we get out of this mediocre bubble? So I don't think Mike Macdonald probably has like the vibes of the city and the fans. I don't think that crosses his mind. I don't think he feels that at all. But it's for a team that like doesn't have a lot of they had trouble getting their home crowd back, and they're having trouble kind of building a franchise player and getting the fans excited. Like since Russ left, they haven't had that guy, and it's not an easy decision with him. He is, like you said, just from the sample size I have, like the film crew, like those guys love Geno, but they do not represent the masses, and that's the biggest difference between a lot of Twitter. If you go to a game and ask the average person their thoughts on Geno, or they ask a casual fan of another team their thoughts on Geno, you heard Grant Cohen talk about him this year. They think he freaking sucks. And so I don't know how connected ownership is with that. I don't know where John is with that, but it's a lingering part of like the mediocrity of and kind of the irrelevant level of the franchise now. And from a football perspective, it probably does make the most sense. But yeah, that's got to be lingering somewhere in the building. I don't know where, but
yeah, the MacGyver McGruber offseason continues for the Seahawks.
They got forks in the road in 3 spots.
Yeah, they do.
I think Geno's a fork in the road because $44 million. That's not a number you can move forward with. It's got to be moved. Either a cut, a signing, trade, likely a signing to lower that. DK's in the last year of his deal. His cap number's too high. So they got to do something. It could be just a simple extension. It could be a restructure. And then the offensive line, the interior offensive line. I think they got forks in the road in all 3 of those spots. And I think it tees up exactly what you're talking about.
I got a negative take. And then do you have time for a mock draft?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
All right. So this is the most negative spin I'll put on it. And there's part of me that believes this. It doesn't matter. They can sign DK and they can sign Geno. This team's, by the time they actually are to contender status, those contracts will be up anyway. So they could easily be, if Geno's signed to an extension, there's no way it's going to be more than 3 years with it really being a 2-year deal. Like there's just that I'm positive about. And
but it opens the door if they don't do those moves, they don't have the flexibility to kind of set up the next couple of years. But I think you're right. I think those are kind of, they just have to happen. So they're almost irrelevant.
I think they'll probably, I think there's a very good chance that those deals happen. And even if they didn't, that it's not going to change the trajectory of the franchise.
Yeah.
And that's what's going to change the trajectory of the franchise is finding young blue chip players that become dominant players in the league. And right now, Jeff, how many All-Pros do the Seahawks have this year?
None.
0. How many Pro Bowlers, voted, first vote in Pro Bowlers?
They had 1, and they should have had 2. They should have had 1 All-Pro. Leonard Williams was an All-Pro level player, but I think the question we've talked about since 2022 or 23 remains. I think
you got to have 3 at least. And I think generally if you want to truly be a contender, you're talking about 5.
Yeah. I think Witherspoon is the only young dude on that list right now. I think Leonard Williams played there. I don't know if he can maintain that over 3 years, but he's a very good player. But who was next? JSN ended up at the Pro Bowl. He had a good year. I don't think I could call him a blue chip. And then you did the show on Byron Murphy yesterday. I think he's got a lot of potential, but we haven't seen those flashes yet. I think he could be a good player. I don't know if he could be a great player. And you're still left with a lot of good. They have a lot of good. Tariq Woolen didn't take a step. Charles Cross did for a couple weeks, but he was not close to a blue chip player. Boye Maffe's good. He's not great. Ernest Jones, very good player. I don't think he's great. Julian Love, good player. They have a lot of good. Their roster from 10 to 40 is probably one of the best in the league. For them to get great, like you saw what Jared Verse did, he changed that team.
Yep. That's
Puka Nacua the year before. He changed that team.
That is the most skeptical, but probably if we're really looking hard in the mirror, that's where we are.
Yeah.
Probably not even 2 years away from contending as things stand. Doesn't mean it's hopeless.
That's what football's great, because you can do it quickly.
Yes.
You got to have great drafts. And that's why me and you are upset. Evan always asks why. I don't get why you guys love the draft so much. I think that's why. Anything
you
turn
can
around
change
with a
your
great
team
yeah.
in one draft for sure. So with that in mind, I found a new mock draft simulator, dude. And one of the things, I've never done this before, used this before, it's NFL Draft Buzz. And I have no idea, it could be awful, but they allow us CPU to CPU trades. So there could be actual trades happening between teams we're not controlling. All right. So it could be really weird. And we could have it based off of their rankings or consensus rankings. What do you think we should do?
I kind of like consensus rankings.
All right, let's do consensus rankings. And then you can pick the trade chart. Let's do the Fitzgerald Spielberger one. We've had both those guys on the show. All right, so here we go. All right, we're going to use this. We're going to see how it goes. Like I said, never used this before. Nice little design. I give them credit for that.
Yeah, it's a little different.
And how do we start draft? There we go. All right, so we are at pick 18, and these are the guys that are available to us. So wait, Travis Hunter's available? What's
this? Is that right? Go up to the top here. Okay.
What?
Okay, we might need to ditch this thing.
let's restart. That's ridiculous. Reset draft. Okay, let's redo this again.
So maybe no
let's
consensus
do warp
rankings?
speed, random factor for CPU selections.
One or
make
four?
it very not random. Can still allow for CPU to CPU trades. We'll do the draft buzz rankings in case the consensus is way off. All right, because that was crazy.
We could have got Abdul Carter, Travis Hunter.
Yeah, that was crazy. All right, so
doesn't look like it went very well.
Okay.
Oh, no, okay,
so
it looks
that's
better.
At least
sure
more
Landon
logical.
Jackson
Okay,
is,
we're in a logical place here.
Yeah.
That seems more, yeah. Kelvin Banks 4 is a little high, but fine.
For the most part, it's fine.
Yeah,
Membu,
I've seen worse.
Yeah,
Membu going early.
Gray's
I
Abel,
respect that.
15.
What's that?
Gray's Abel, 16th overall. Not
Who
sure
knows
Landon
where
Jackson
that guy's
is,
going to
but-
go. All right, so here we are at 18. What is your current state of things? Are you like, should we look at trading back? Are you Tyler Warren's there and you run up?
I would still take Tyler Warren.
You just run up there, you take Tyler Warren.
But it's so hard. There's a lot of names I'd want to. No, I'd probably trade back.
You trade back. Okay.
I trade back.
Let's do.
I think the fact that Warren's there probably gives you some more value. Kyle Pitts.
Offering Kyle Pitts and
second rounder.
No.
No.
We're not taking a
next year's second.
Oh wait, third round and no. 20th pick plus a 2026 2 and Jonathan Cooper.
That's a pretty good offer.
That's a pretty good offer, but I don't think we're gonna do that.
This one he really likes to use the players.
Yeah. So here we go. We're just gonna take Tyler Warren? Like,
No,
do you have any
no.
do you have any hesitation with Shamar Stewart sitting there?
I do. I was gonna
Have
say
I
that
convinced you at all that he's a guy to think about?
because there's clearly a gap after these guys go based on these rankings. Because there's no one really after Green that excites me that much.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know where Donovan Jackson is in this mock. I don't know where Booker is in this mock.
Booker's down here, 38. That's about where Booker is for me, by the way. I'm not down on Booker, but I think relative to people that have him as the 12th overall pick, I'm down. Like, I just don't think I'm that high on him.
Yeah.
I don't hate these rankings.
No, they're not. Let's see what happens if we go Stewart. Because tight end, there's so much depth in this draft.
Okay. We're gonna go edge. I like
Yeah.
it. Let's do it. Drafted. Now we're all the way down to 50.
Is Malachi Starks and Jalen Walker still there?
We're not taking Malachi Starks because I just don't believe it's real.
Loveland not going to be there.
Loveland won't be there. Amanawari is. I've grown more interested in him. Have you spent any time looking at him?
No, safety's not a priority for me at this point.
He is a Cam Chancellor body, so he is like a safety / linebacker. I find him intriguing, but not enough to go without drafting an offensive lineman early. Let's look at offensive line.
Donovan Jackson right there.
I'm not as high on Tate Ratledge after watching him, man. I love his persona, but I don't. I definitely would take Donovan Jackson.
I would take Donovan Jackson. Jake Majors, no. In this system, like there's a huge gap, like what the linemen were when we last looked for what would be there now.
That's exactly right, man. And I've seen this in a few places. Like it's getting to be where if you don't take the offensive lineman by 50, you're not getting him.
No. I there's no way I'm coming out of a draft without a O-line in the first 2 rounds. I would be very comfortable with Booker, 18, trade back, slide. I think I'm that high on him. But if Jackson, if you can end up with Stewart and Jackson at 50, that's a better scenario than whatever Booker and say Birch or something.
All right. I think we're both in the same boat here. They haven't ranked at 86, so it could be available even if we traded back.
Yeah.
Next offer.
They're very into next year's picks.
Yeah, everyone always does that. I mean, reject all. All right, so we're taking Donovan Jackson.
I'm taking Donovan Jackson.
Yeah, we're taking Donovan Jackson. All right, done. Now we're at the 3rd round, pick 82. So far we've got Shamar. I like the design of this, by the way. You've got your picks over here.
Yeah, it's very clean.
It's not bad. So, and profile, I haven't brought this up. This is nice.
Stats.
NFL draft buzz. I don't mind it. All right. So
I'm kind of out on Fannin.
You're out on Fannin?
Yeah, he seems more of like an H-back type than the kind of tight end I think they need in this offense.
He didn't help himself a lot in the Senior Bowl. Like he was one of the smaller school guys that did not come in and show that he belonged. So I think he's a fine player, but
I think like I heard Sean Payton saying this week, like everyone's like, "What do you need? A receiver?" He's like, "No, we need what's called like a joker, which is like the Jimmy Graham, Alvin Kamara, the guy who wins the middle of the field, like kind of we can chess piece type."
Right.
I don't think that's where the Seahawks are. I think Denver built the offensive line. They're trying to build a run game. They need that kind of piece. I think the Seahawks need to build the infrastructure of kind of what Denver has with their line. So I'm more looking for like Mason Taylor's a guy I know you've talked about a lot. I think he fits really, really well. Arroyo, they're saying might go in like that high end 2nd round at this point.
He's available.
Is he available?
He's available. Yeah, Arroyo and
because the way I've been doing these drafts, I think you got to go O-line in the first 2 rounds. I think round 3 is where my tight end sweet spot is. I
agree. So these are the tight ends that are available. I mean, this is a really good list still available. And I don't think this is crazy. I think the tight ends probably will get gobbled up in round 2 a little bit more than this is showing. But I think 3rd round is not crazy.
I like Arroyo. I still think I like Arroyo here.
I think he's certainly got, I think, the highest ceiling as a receiver.
Taylor's probably the most complete.
Yeah, I mean,
it's not a great picture.
No, not his best picture. All All right, so
I don't think Arroyo will be here, so let's take Taylor.
You don't think Arroyo will be here? I think
No,
he could be. I think he'll be here.
I think he's going to go in the second round.
All right, I'll take Taylor if you want. I'll tell you what, I'd be willing to take Arroyo. I don't think that's a crazy thing here.
No?
If you want him. No, I don't think it's crazy.
Okay, my gut is Arroyo. I think he's.
Let's do that. I think that's a better pick. I think that's a better pick. Let's do that. All right. So
if this is their first three picks, I am celebrating.
Right. So now we go back to fourth round, and you picked Shamar Stewart, Donovan Jackson, Elijah Arroyo. By the way, Mason Taylor is still available. Not that we're going to take two tight ends. Chris Paul, linebacker. I don't know if you spend any time on him, but a lot of people think pretty highly of him. And then you've got
Kevin Winston would be a nice pick right there.
Kevin Winston?
Yeah, he's a cool safety.
What do you like about him?
He's just a very versatile player. I think he'd be like a really good third safety. He looked pretty good in the college playoff. But it'd be very hard for me not to want to double down on O-line here.
Mm-hmm.
I think they made a mistake last year not doing it. We talked about McCormick. We talked about other guys that went. They ended up doing it with LeMaya technically, but I think they missed like the proper range to do it. I think LeMaya is fine, but if they got Mason McCormick or someone like that, they could have come out way ahead. So center, guard.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at offensive line, they've got a couple centers available. I think Jonah Monheim's an interesting guy. I liked him, but I haven't watched enough of Majors and Wilson. I know Wilson is a guy.
I've heard Majors character is really, really high. I just in this zone blocking scheme, I need to learn more about their kind of movements.
I think defensive line is also,
Farmer would be an interesting player at this point too.
Yeah. And then there was another position that
receiver. I think
linebacker.
Yeah.
Jeffrey Bassa.
Bassa would be really. Actually, I would take Jeffrey Bassa.
Is that what you do?
Yeah, I would take him at this spot.
Done. All right. So Bassa's become one of our favorite picks.
I think fourth round linebacker. I think that's a great.
I agree with you there. All right. So now we're at the fifth round. Cam Scatabo is still available. That doesn't make sense.
Devin Neal's a cool player, but they don't need.
I will tell you, there is a little part of me that's like, draft a running back in this class and don't sign.
This is a great running back class.
Don't sign Kenneth Walker to an extension and just keep that running back position cheap. Just keep it cheap.
I agree. I would not sign Walker at this point unless he really takes off this year in this new offense. But what's going on at receiver?
So do you get tempted to go back to the offensive line here, like you were saying?
Yes, and receiver as well.
So Ricky White, Kyle Williams.
Yeah, no one's a must to me here. I like Ricky White, but I would take a look at O-line first. I think I would take a shot on one of the centers here.
All right, pick which one is appealing to you.
I'm gonna go with Monheim. I
like it.
I think this is his range. I think he's gonna be a fit in this. Yeah, I've heard good stuff about him coming out of the Senior Bowl. Do we have some measurables here? I think he's a good.
That they got these measurables.
Yeah, I think how these guys test will be really interesting because I think movement's really important. But let's see what they're saying. So scouting report, we got strength, excellent movement with decent speed, technician and pass pro, high football IQ, lacks bulk, concerned about anchor. So this might be Olu Timmy part 2.
Yeah,
but
I don't think it's bad.
I would take a shot. I would take a shot on Monheim.
All right, so that's our 5th round pick. This is our first 7-rounder that we've done together, Jeff. We're into our 6th round where we have 2 picks in the 6th round.
Let's go.
You could double up here. You could draft another running. You could draft a running back. You could draft another linebacker. Danny Stutzman or Chris Paul are still available.
Yeah, I think this would be a great spot for Chris Paul. But we don't need a 4th linebacker.
We don't need a 4th linebacker, probably. There's a lot of linebackers, man.
Tight end would be an interesting spot to double up.
Quarterback.
Yeah, God.
I
didn't even look at quarterback. I forgot about it, I'll be honest.
Yeah, not a lot of quarterbacks to think about.
Devin Neal would be, like, if he's in there in the 6th round, like, I don't know how you don't take that guy.
All right. I mean,
But what's our receivers? Ricky White still there?
let's check out the receivers.
Kyle Williams.
Ricky White's gone.
We need some depth at this spot, but this class just is
This
not
class
exciting
is
to me.
bad, dude.
Yeah, that's why I'm willing to kind of hit a free agent, see if you get one.
I think you'd almost be better off doubling up at tight end.
Tight
although,
end,
like,
I agree.
you could
Lachey
get,
would be an interesting guy. He is like a pure blocking, like Iowa dude. Like I think I'd consider this guy pretty heavily.
Yeah, so
This guy is just like your typical blocking tight end. I don't think he has great upside as a receiver. I think he can play a lot of like the Will Dissly kind of role. He's got some bloodlines here.
NFL All-Pro Jim Lachey.
He's not a great mover. Again, I don't think you're looking at him to be a receiver. I think you have Arroyo. I think this guy is your inline dude. I think he could be your Farrell Brown replacement.
Lachey projects as a high upside tight end prospect with day 2 draft potential.
That seems aggressive.
Blend of prototypical size, soft hands, and football IQ make him an attractive target for teams. Might not be an elite athlete, but yeah, I don't know. So what do you think?
I would take him. I would take Lachey.
You take Lachey. All right.
That's our Farrell Brown replacement.
And then we're back up again here in a little minute again. So we're just ignoring Scadaboo because it's just ridiculous.
Yeah,
I'm
not taking him. I don't want him anywhere.
How about a place kicker?
Let's do it. Let's spite Evan. Where's the?
I mean, if you're in the 6th round, I don't
weren't they
hate it.
scouting him?
What's that?
Weren't they scouting that guy from Miami?
They are. What about Dennis Martinez at running back?
Ooh,
You know
that's
him?
a fun player. Yeah, Damian Martinez. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's where they should take a running back. The 6th round, take a flyer, see if they can hit. If not, it's a 6th rounder. If he hits, I think this is a good spot for one.
All right, let's do it. I like that pick. We haven't taken him yet, and
No. He's a
I
cool
think
player.
he's my kind of guy at the running back position. All right,
I would
so
love. Look at this draft we came out with.
now last pick.
Oh, we still got one more. So now we take the kicker. Let's take the
Now you
kicker.
take
from
the
Miami.
kicker.
Yeah. Let's take that kicker
There's the
from
Miami guy, Bora
Yeah.
Gellis.
We know they scouted him. Evan was very upset about this.
Okay, let's take the kicker.
This is a spite pick.
Let's take the kicker. All right.
We can save like $5 million if they move off this guy.
Hell yeah, dude. Let's see. Give our draft a title. First. I don't know. Let's just close this.
John Schneider. Do they give us a
Close.
grade? Do they give us a list here?
All right. So it doesn't seem like. What is that? Oh, so this is our draft. I guess this is the best view we can get of it. Shamar Stewart, Donovan Jackson, Elijah Arroyo, Jeffrey Bassa, Jonah Monheim, Luke Lachey, Damian Martinez, and Andres Borregales, kicker. How do you feel?
I love the top. I think the first 3 rounds would be an absolute A+. I think kind of looking at the day 3, I think I fall into some of the John Schneider patterns of the last few years where I'm filling spots rather than trying to hope I hit a home run. And I think like the Monheim, Lachey, Bassa range kind of feels like the Mike Morris, Olu. I think I like what I did with the team overall, but if we're trying to find like the next Puka or the next Kobe Turner, I'm not sure they're in this draft. But I really like overall how we made this team tough. We made this team more athletic. I think we accomplished a lot. I would have loved to get a second guard. But I love the double. Yeah.
Let me ask you this. If you had taken Tyler Warren as you wanted to in the first round.
Yeah.
And then you didn't have Arroyo, so you used that pick on, maybe a defensive tackle or something like that. Do you think you would have liked this draft better?
No, probably worse. And I think the depth of the tight end class is kind of fits the Seahawks. I think the Seahawks. Look, the thing I love about Warren is this draft feels thin, and like that's That's to get a home run player is great, but I don't think it sets you up very well. I think you're kind of chasing at that point.
Yep.
And I think ultimately he's going to be gone by 18 anyway.
Yeah, agreed.
And I think ultimately this draft would have turned out worse. I think getting Arroyo in the 3rd round with Stewart gives you a much higher ceiling as a roster. I think having a really good tight end is not going to change what they need to fix. And I think if you get Stewart and he hits and it becomes the edge one on your team, that could transform this defense from good to great.
Yeah, this is going to be the fascinating thing for Jeff, you and I to obsess over for months. But if you're to ask me, like, who do I think has the best chance of being a blue chipper between Shamar Stewart and Tyler Warren, I would say Tyler Warren.
Tyler Warren, yeah.
For sure. So, like, if you want certainty of blue chip potential, he's the better one. I think that Shamar Stewart has blue chip potential and plays like a position that's of high value. And I think you have a chance of getting a guy in Arroyo who could still be, I don't know if he's going to be a blue chip,
probably,
but
not.
He could, I don't think it's crazy to think he could develop into a Pro Bowl player if everything works out for him. So I don't know, man. Like that's kind of the game to play. I like what you did here. I think Donovan Jackson could be available at 50. I think there's going to be a good guard available at 50. Everyone that's saying if they don't use their 18th pick on an offensive lineman, then they're blowing this draft. I don't know, man. I'm not there. I think it generally plays out better if you use that first pick on a defensive lineman, either edge or defensive tackle. That's kind of where I'm at so far.
Yeah, like I think if we take a guard at 18, 90% of Seahawks fans are going to celebrate. It's the easiest way to just win over the fans, and it probably is an overcorrection. I think that's where I think you land, and I think you land trying to figure out what the best value is, and you got to stick to the premium positions and get blue chip players there. If you end up with like a so-so guard like the J.C. Latham of last year, like, are you really happy because you got J.C. Latham, or like that's where the kind of thing is like they could have taken J.C. Latham at 16, and I think we'd be looking at that first is like, I don't know about that one.
Exactly.
So I think that's the kind of thing where you don't want to overcorrect, but the Seahawks are just in this dire spot now. It's been a 10-year problem. So I think everyone's going to convince themselves into a guard, but I think when you look at like the Shanahan and the way to build a team, I think there's a pretty good case you can get. I think Jeremiah's talked about this, is the guard sweet spot in this draft is day 2. And I think they probably set up better going with one of those blue chip guys early. But if they take Tyler Booker at 18, you're not going to hear a word of complaint from me.
Yeah.
But
I'm not gonna be critical, but that's kind of my point of view.
I think like ultimately for team building perspective, if you can hit on a really good edge and then get a good guard, that sets you up a lot better than the opposite approach where you take Donovan Jackson at 18 and maybe Birch in the 2nd round.
Yeah.
You're more likely to get the next Boye Mafe, which is fine, but it kind of pushes the problem forward.
Yeah, exactly. Keith Lavelle has been a member for 6 months, says, just a thank you to Brian and my Hawk family. That's very nice of you. And Jeff, thanks, man, for spending 90 minutes with us on your Saturday. And make sure you give Jeff a follow if you haven't already. And congratulations to everybody who lasted 90 minutes on this Seahawks Saturday. Appreciate all of you for tuning in. And, we got a super chat here from Ed Chan. Brian, we just need you to sneak Jeff into the Hawks draft room somehow. I agree. Appreciate all of you, and we will see you tomorrow, Super Bowl Sunday, for what will be episode 321 of Hawk Blogger Mornings. This has been episode 320, and I'm Brian Nemhauser. Have a wonderful rest of your Saturday, everybody.